Hi, good evening everybody. We're going to start in Parashat Trumah, chapter 25, verse 2. We'll read verses 1 through 3, just to get some background here. V'yidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Hashem spoke to Moses, saying, Daber el bnei Yisrael. Speak to the children of Israel. V'yichuchu li truma, and you shall take for me a portion, a gift. You shall take for me whatever we're going to translate truma as a gift, a portion. Me'et v'kol ish asher yidvenu libo. From every man whose heart gives willingly, or will motivate him. We're also going to discuss what yidvenu means. Every man whose heart motivates him, tikhu es trumasi. You shall take, that's you plural, okay? You shall take from him my truma. V'zos ha-truma, this is verse 3. V'zos ha-truma asher tikhu mi'itam. This is the portion or the gift which you shall take from them. And then it lists a whole bunch of things, different materials used for the tabernacle. Okay, so a little bit of background here. What we're dealing with is the fact that there are 3 times the word truma, portion or gift, is mentioned. That's one thing to keep in mind. Another idea that we're going to discuss now is that, yes, there are 3 obligations. There are 3 different types of gifts that we had to give then, and we still give every year, starting now, the month of Adar, for the new financial year that starts at Nisan, which is the first month of the year. So Adar is the 12th month of this cycle, and the new financial year for the upkeep of the temple starts in the following month, in Nisan. So, traditionally, as the Gemara says, that announcements were made during Adar to start this collection, so that we would have enough to start the korbanot, the daily sacrifices from the collection was made by everyone as an atonement for the Jewish people on a daily basis. That's also going to play some aspect here. Now, so we've discussed the idea that there are 3 times truma is mentioned. Also, 2 of those trumot, 2 of those, we'll call it tax, or gifts to the temple. 2 of them are obligatory, and they are also equal. Everyone, doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, you must give the same amount. If you're wealthy, as the poor. The poor still has to give the same amount as the wealthy. Call it half a shekel. Now, that's in terms of the 3 times. Now, there is part of the verse that we read that mentions from every man whose heart will motivate him. Me'et kol ish asher yidvenu libo. Well, that's stuck in between 2 of those trumot, and we're going to discover that it's only the last one that discusses the different type of materials that anybody who, let's say, had those type of materials and wanted to give more or less, which materials they wanted to give, it was their free choice. But the other 2 trumot, meaning out of 3 trumot, 2 of them are equal. One is definitely a free will offering that is given willingly, and the amount is determined by the giver, not by the collectors or by God. Okay, so now that we have that straight, we're also going to discuss the idea that the word v'yikahu, right, the concept, what is v'yikahu? It shall take. Well, we also have to understand this is actually a giving. This is a gift. So how is a gift taken? A gift is usually given, not taken. So we're going to discuss the idea of what is behind the word v'yikahu. Now also twice it says v'yikahu, and one time it says tikhu. So we're going to discuss the difference there as well. Okay? And also the order. 2 of them 2 out of the Trumas, it always says take the Truma, but on the third one, the Truma should be taken. So we have to understand why is it like that. And also, so let me discuss that. Okay, also the idea that 2 of them, well, this is really going to be the first question, so maybe we'll start with that, but the idea that you're taking it to me, you're taking my Truma, God speaking, twice he refers to him as, we'll call him the receiver, and once it's talking about just a regular portion that is being taken from them. So 2 of the takings are referenced to the receiver, and one of the takings, or one of the Truma, is referenced to the giver. So now we'll start explaining the Kli Yakar's questions. He has 5 questions. V'yichu li Truma b'gomer v'chulei, the rest of the verses which we have already read. Shalosh Trumot niskaru kan, 3 gifts, 3 givings, 3 portions are mentioned here. V'yesh v'inyan zeh kama sfekot. There is regarding this idea many questions. 1. Ki lama yiches shtei trumot rishonot el Hashem Yisbarach. Why are 2 of the portions, 2 of the gifts, actually the 2 first ones, related or are relation to Hashem himself, as it says in the first one, Ki Rishona Amar. In the first one it says, V'yichuli lishmi, as if yichuli, you're taking it, it should be taken for me. So that's God talking. V'shnia, the second time Truma is mentioned, it says, Tuku et Trumasi, take my Truma, my portion. Again, those 2 first Trumas are relating to God, the receiver. Aval b'shlishit lo hiskir lo zeh v'lo zeh, but the third time Truma is mentioned, it's not a language of li or Trumati relating to God. V'adarabba, quite the opposite. Ne'emar bo, it says in it or regarding it, mi'itam, from them. Okay, and if we're talking about it should be taken from them, it's certainly relating to Yichasa el Hanotni. It's relating to the giver, not necessarily the receiver. So that's the first question. Why are 2 of the Trumot relating to God and a third one relating to the giver? Second question, V'od kasha. Lama b'shtei Trumot rishonot, why is it that the first 2 times the Truma is mentioned, Hikdim loshon kicha li loshon truma. So why is it that the language of taking precedes the language of the gift? Meaning, taking the gift, and then in the third mention of the gift, Vishlishit, Hikdim loshon truma li kicha, that the word gift precedes the word taking. Okay, it sounds like we're nitpicking, but every word, every letter of the Bible, of the Torah, is holy and meaningful, and there has to be meaning behind it. You don't get this when you read the English. V'od kasher, a third question is going to be, Eich hichnis maimar, how is it that the statement was placed, I'm going to explain, placed between these 2 first Trumot? How is this statement placed? The statement of Me'et Kol Ish Asher Yidvenu Libo, from each man, right? From each man who's willing to give from his heart. Bein Shtei Trumot Rishonot. Like, it doesn't make sense because those 2 Trumot are for sure Shayu Baka Ligugolet. These were given as a standard a standard amount for each head, like we call it a head tax. It doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, you paid the exact same amount as every other Jew, a half a shekel, and it was given for each person. This was a completely obligatory. It was a complete obligation al kol ish Yisrael, upon every Jew. Ve'enan tluyin b'nidvat leiv hanoten klal. It was not dependent on the giving, the voluntary offering of the heart of the one who gives at all. Right? It was an obligatory tax that could even be forced, as we're about to see, but it is dependent on the obligation and not on the free will gift. So how is it that those words, and I'll say them again, from every man whose heart will motivate him, how is it or why is it placed between the first Trumot, when those Trumot were standard, number one, and they were not an option, and they were, as opposed to being obligatory, they were obligatory. Whereas the third one, Ki'im Trumah Shlishit, when it came to the third time Trumah was mentioned, it's mentioned as regards Shenem Marbo. It says regarding it, Zahav v'Kesef u'Nechoshet, that's gold, silver, and bronze or copper. So then it goes on to list all the other materials that were required to build the tabernacle. And we know for sure that this was as much or as little as you felt you wanted to give, and there was no obligation whatsoever placed upon the giver. He levada ba b'nedava. It came only through voluntary gifts. So how is it that those words only of the free will offering appear in the first two Trumot and not in relation to the third one at all? Okay, the fourth question is, Lama Hizkir Boloshin Kicha. Why are we even mentioning? How can you get away with mentioning the word Kicha? That language is taking, which is Mashma Behechreach. It infers that it was Bal Klorka, that was forced. But you didn't have a choice. V'hadavar haba b'nedava ein bo hachreach. So when you come and give something willingly, it's never, you never use force. There's no obligation, and yet here it seems to be that way. Again, we said that the words kicha, the word kicha is a taking, and yet in conceptually speaking, if we know that one of them at least, if not all of them, should be, conceptually speaking, as the words are used, from every man whose heart will motivate him, okay? And that's a little bit problematic, because it should have said netina, as opposed to chicha, a giving, as opposed to a taking. Furthermore, the fifth question, v'od, b'rishona amar v'yichu b'lashon nistar. So in the very first of the three Trumot that are mentioned, it says v'yichu. Again, the word is that they shall take. They shall take. It's not you shall take, but they shall take. It's nistar. We'll call that third person. Ubishayim acharonot. But the second and third time that Trumah is mentioned, that the gift is mentioned, it says tikku, which is b'nokeach. We'll call that second person, which means you shall take. So why is it that the first time it's mentioned, okay, they shall take, as opposed to the second and third time, it's b'nokeach, it's second person, you shall take? What's going on here? This is the questions. These are the 5 questions that the Kli Yakar opens up with in Parashat Trumah. So now we're going to delve deeply into the answers. The Kli Yakar begins, it seems plausible for me to say, it's close for me to say this, when we're dealing with the concept of what we call this monetary tax called the shekel. So what normally happens is So everyone gives, it's part of the census. Everyone gives the same coin, and we count the coins, and now we know how many people there are. There is it's forbidden to count Jewish people. This is how we Poston b'halacha. This is the law in the Shulchan Aruch, and one is not allowed to count the Jewish people. But there is a machloket bein mefarashei Torah. Not everyone agrees with it. Namely, we'll see it's the Abarbanel. It could be others, but he brings down the Abarbanel. So first he begins by telling us that when we're dealing with counting the people through the money that they give, there is an argument regarding this. So, kiyesh soyvrim, there are some that hold shalom nimnu Yisrael ligu golet, that one should not count Jews by head, meaning by number. Ella ashkalim nimnu, you count the money that was given. Remember, everyone is given the exact amount as a offering, as a gift, as a portion. So you count the money, and then you know how many people there were that gave. And why is that? Kedei lahatzilam min ayin hara, in order to save them from what we call the evil eye. When things are counted, once you know exactly what there is, and maybe there's a lot, so there could be jealousy, there could be an evil eye placed on it. We'll discuss what exactly an evil eye is another time. But in the meantime, like if you leave over an estimate as opposed to an exact amount, there remains place for a blessing and for positive results and consequences, as opposed to counting things to the exact number, which could result in the ayin hara, an evil eye. So why did we count the coins and not the people? So there should not be an evil eye on the Jewish people. However, he says the Abarbanel is cholek al deyazu. The Abarbanel disagrees with this opinion, and the oimer shenimnu ligugolet mamish. He holds that we actually counted the Jews by head, meaning that we counted them outright. V'hashkalim nitnu derech tzedakah, and when the shkalim were given, that was a way of giving charity. We still count the Jews, we just give the tzedakah, we give the coins, either just before we're counted or just after we're counted. And why is that? L'kofer nefesh, as an atonement for their souls, for each individual. Kimivor b'sifri the Parshas Kitose. Okay, so that's a whole another thing we'll discuss another time. But in the meantime, we're going to go on. We turn the page. V'yesh makom iti l'chalek lashon yidvenu l'shnei panim. He says this is a proper place for me to bring the idea of the language as the word used in the verse yidvenu into two ways, two options, two ways to look at this word. And it could mean this, and it could mean that simultaneously. Let's see. If the word nidava is as it means in its most simplest form, which means a gift or a voluntary gift, v'im ha'hefach mamish. Now you can also learn it the complete opposite way as well, according to the Kli Yakar. What does he mean? Midoloktiv yinedivenu, from the very fact that it does not have the nun, it was not written yinedivenu with the nun, binun, because that's really the root, nadav, nidava, nadev, to volunteer. In kain yesh makom lefarsho kamo yidvenu b'vav, meaning that if you don't read it, the fact that it does not say with the nun, you can certainly read it and explain it as it sounds, not as it's written necessarily, because even though it's not written with the nun, it is written with a bet. He says, but it could sound, and we explained yidvenu, which sounds exactly the way it is written. Yidvenu with a bet. But he's about to explain there are certain letters that are exchangeable, meaning the bet and the vav, they make the same sound when you do not have the dot, the dogesh, in the bet. It's a vet, and the vet has a vav sound. It sounds, like a V. So, befrat, beit, refuah, shemotzaah, kemova. Specifically, the bet, which is soft, meaning without the dot, it's a vet. As it comes out from the mouth, it certainly sounds like a vav. Zemoira al misha libo daveh v'koev al hanatina. So this enlightens us about the word that upon somebody whose heart is doveh. Doveh means atzuv. It means he's not happy about this gift that he's giving. He's not necessarily stingy, but it hurts him with koev. He's depressed and he's hurt al hanatina about the gift that he's about to give. Therefore, shtei trumot rishonot, the first two times that the word trum is used, we know this is the obligatory gift. Shelachol hadeyos hayu chayva al kol ish, that according to everybody, this was an obligatory gift to give upon every man. Even if he didn't want to give. Nevertheless, it was totally possible for the collectors to take it from him against his will. Therefore, Hiktim behem loshon kicha litruma. Therefore, the word kicha comes before the word truma in the first two times the truma is mentioned. Ki al yidei shigavu agaboyim ligvot mimenu bal korcho yavo litrom. Because it's through the coming forth by the collectors to collect from him forcibly that he comes or brings him towards giving the gift. So you see the kicha comes first, the taking comes first, and then the gift comes. Ki kicha hagaboyim misabebes hatruma, because it's the taking of the gaboyim, by the gaboyim coming to take, that's what causes the truma to eventually be given, which is the gift. Aval hashlishi, but the third time truma is mentioned, habo b'nedava. We know we're talking about coming to give a free will offering, a free will gift. Lo haya sham chovat klal. We know there's no obligation on the third gift at all, not in the amount, and certainly not even the giving. If it's according to the will of the heart, if the heart doesn't want to give, they can't force him. If he didn't want to give, who can force him? Therefore, the word truma comes first, precedes the taking. And why is that? Loimar, to tell us, she'achashu min nidvat libo karashem v'tar min mimono k'tiratzoinoi. See, after the fact that he already voluntarily announced what he's going to give, and that he's going to give from his money according to his own will, if he does such a thing, as yachlo gaboyim likafo v'likaf mimenu Bal Kurcho Mashatorim Kavar. Then, and only then, certainly the tax collectors can force him and to take from him against his will what he has already pledged. I'm going to use the word pledged because we know that a pledge is through the mouth and giving is the fulfillment of the pledge. Hein bapeh, hein b'yadayim. Whether it was a verbal pledge, Haim B'Yadayim, whether it was the Foel, the actual giving. L'chak ne'emar, that's why it says, Zota Truma Asher Tifhu Mitam. This is the gift, the portion which you shall take from them. So we have a few, answers up a whole lot of things. First of all, the word truma comes before the taking, because he made the pledge first, and then the taking comes later, and it's mitam from them. Okay, we also ask the question, why is the third one relating to the giver, whereas the first two are relating to the taker? So he wants to say, basically saying, after you made the pledge, so only then are you able to take from them bizro, with your arm, with your hand, meaning physically, if in the meanwhile, meaning in between the time they made the pledge and the time that the tax collectors came to collect, the person had regret. He realized he offered too much. He made a pledge that was beyond his means, or he just decided he could use the money for something else. That's called regret in a pledge, and that the tax collectors had the right at that point to force him. But it's only at that point, after the pledge has been made. Zesh Sha'amar, this is what it means. Da'aber el b'nei Israel le'yichuli truma. Speak to the children of Israel, and they will take from me truma. Shimanu agaboyim le'yichu truma mikol ish ve'ish. They will appoint tax collectors, and they will take the truma from each person. Now, but kodim sheyidba'u me'acherim yitnu hema chelka. Before they can make the claim from others, they themselves have to give their portion. L'kashet et atzmam techila. The concept of ornamenting yourself first. They themselves have to be innocent of withholding. How can you make accusations you're withholding when you yourself didn't give? They must give first to be clean, a clean slate for themselves, and then they can go around and collect from others. Kli Yakar kach yikchu me'acherim, and only then can they go ahead and collect from others. And this is reflective in the vav, which is like connecting the word and they shall collect. It's only afterwards that they give first, and or maybe even including them, and they shall collect. Remember we mentioned these 4, 5, 6 words appear between the first two trumot, which are not a free will offering. Nevertheless, it appears there. Why? Shalibo doive ela natina. Because of the word doive, which we're reflecting on the switching of the vav and the vet. So instead of a gift, it's a worry, it's a concern, it's not just regret, but it's a atzuv, it's some kind of a depressing situation on the giver. Kihu ish kilai ve'eno noise miratzon tov, because if he's acting as a miser and he's not giving with a full willingness or positive willingness, v'yesh l'cho shema yitko takes im hagaboyim, and there is a concern that maybe they'll get in an argument with the tax collector. Tichu atem, so then you will collect. Now we're saying you. Who's that? Moshe v'Aaron. O Nisiyeh Yisrael. So if the tax collectors are not successful in retrieving the monies that they were sent out to collect, so then tichechu atem. So then you, not they, but you, meaning Moses and Aaron, or maybe other leaders of the Jewish people, perhaps the princes of the Jewish people, leaders of their families, kivada yusuf paneim v'lo yirivu imahem al zeh. Certainly they will lift their heads in a positive sense and not get in a fight with them, because these are the leaders that they recognize and know, as opposed to the average Joe tax collector coming knocking on their door. And everyone respected Moses and Aaron and the princes of the tribes. V'im yitvenu, remember also yitvenu can mean free will. So Perusha Kamo Yinadvenu, exactly as we understand and the Davat to be a free will offering from your heart. Ulashon Nadiv Leiv, certainly a voluntary heart. Musav Shulamala, certainly then this is going on what we said above, meaning the truma that was said before. The Yichu, it says, Yichu li, right? You should take from me. They shall take from me. Who's they? Hageboyim. That's who should take from me. And what is that? Truma me'ed kol ish asher yidvenu nidivos liba. The truma, that which each person had, motivated or given out of a free will offering from his heart. So memela nishma, it's going to come out that we understand it to be like the following: Shema shama achacha tichlet trumasi. The fact that it says after the first one, the second time it says, right, you shall take my truma. That's mashma atem be'atzmechem tichlechu. It refers you, yourselves, you will take. Medaber. You must speak with those people who do not have the motivating heart or the willingness to give, for the reason that we are about to mention. Amnam, however, from what is mentioned in Parshas V'Yakel, Kol Nadiv Leiv Yeviyeho, that anyone who has his willing heart will bring it forward. He's going to bring it. Shma mina. What do we hear from that? Shekan medaber b'misha livu dovev koev. That they spoke here. They spoke with people who had a depressed heart or a unwilling heart or a painful heart to give. Mimenu tichu ba'chorcho. And from them they took. You shall take against their will. But someone who has the willing heart, the willingness, he should bring it on his own. You have no need whatsoever to force him. Which is you shall take. That doesn't really make sense, because that was mentioned by the third truma, which certainly comes as a free will offering. So how do we answer this up? There are other things that we can learn from this. That if or when shall come the tax collectors, chashuvim al hamitnadev, so we're talking about very important tax collectors, very important people in the community of stature. They're coming to the one who made the pledge, the one who's going to give. So there's no doubt that they will, meaning they'll respect them, and they'll give more. They would give more than if they had just a regular tax collector come, right? That's why I think that's what they do with fundraisers. You get a very important fundraiser to come. The Rosh Shiva comes to town. All of a sudden, he's able to get money out of the people that the regular fundraisers were not able to move. They were not able to succeed. Ki mitam zed nohagin la'asot midava b'rabin. And it's for this very reason the custom is to try to get people to give in public. Perhaps they'll be more respectable in their giving. The way that their Barbanel explains it, Kigam Hashkalim, even the coins themselves, the amount of money. Even though, yes, it's obligatory, it's an obligation. Nevertheless, we say that it was acting as charity as well as an atonement. And it will be that statement which we said fits in between the first two Trumot. Me'ed kol ish asher yidvenu libo, right? And from every man whose heart will motivate him, meaning a free will gift, Lashon Nedava Mamish. It certainly sounds like we're talking about a free will gift, Nedava Mamish. Musav Ashalamala L'Shalamata, meaning it's going both on the Truma that was said before, as well as the Truma that said right after. Lahara, to teach us what? Shigam Shtei Trumat Elu, that even those two Trumot, meaning the first and second out of the three, that is still dependent on the free will of the giver. By the third time, it was not necessary to mention this. Why? Because it's absolutely clear. It's so simple that third Nedava, that third Truma came through Nedava, came through a free will offering, and there was no obligation at all. Kikavar nirma zeh b'meh shehitim Truma el hakicha. And this was already mentioned, it was already hinted at, in the fact that the Truma comes before the taking only in the third. We saw in the first two that the taking comes before the Truma. But the third time Truma is mentioned, Truma is first, and then the taking. So we see that it was not even necessary to mention because it's a free will offering. Whereas the words, and from each man whose heart it will motivate him, is placed between the first two, therefore related to both, that it needs to come from a willing heart. One should have a willing heart. And since the first two Trumot, they are obligatory and they serve as an atonement for the soul, Commotion Amar, as it does say, you can see in chapter 30, verse 16, L'chaper al nafshotechem, it serves as an atonement for their souls. And it says in Yechezkel, in 18:4, Henkol hanafashos li hena, all the souls belong to me. That's God talking. Ubechesed Hashem, ubechesed Akel Yidbarach, hu lokeach becher lugogelet Trumat HaNefesh. It's only through the mercy of God that He's taking what? He's taking this gift in exchange for the person. Okay? He's taking a coin in place of the person's skull or head. Okay, Nemar B'Rishoina. Now we understand why in the beginning it says B'Chali. Li is used, we're talking about in relation to the taker. Bishniya Trumasi, and the second Truma as well. My Truma, God says. Kishem Hashem Nikra Aleim, because the name of God is called upon or placed upon those two Trumot. Ava Hashlishi, but the third time Truma is mentioned, She'ena Chova, since it's not obligatory, Lo Yechas El Hashem Yisbarach Utlala B'mitnadvim. So it doesn't relate to Hashem, but rather it's dependent on the giver. Shneimar, as it says, Zos HaTruma Asher Tichchu Mitam. This is the Truma which you shall take from them. Ki Tlui Behem, because it's totally dependent on them. Zeh Sha'amar Mitam. The fact that it says from them, Me'itam, Lo Me'it Hashem, Ha'is Choyra. And it was not from Hashem that this was even obligatory. Hine, Karov L'Shmo Atam Acher, the Kli Yakar now introduces a very possible alternative explanation. Why God's name is mentioned in relation, the proximity, to the first two, because we said Li or Truma Si, God's talking about me or my Truma, okay, below Ashlishit, and not relating to the third Truma to Hashem at all. Lefi shebechol makom yesham geder hanava v'hakna bein hatachtonim sham chevyon uzo shel kadosh baruch hu. Okay, what are we saying? Since in every place where you have the name, there is set up a protective fence of humility and submission amongst the lowest of the worlds, the lowest of the beings. And there it's Chevyon Uzo Shel Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's the humility and the shame that God places. Hashokin as Baka v'Shelta Ruach. God rests with the brokenhearted and the lowly. Nidnud Gava, but whenever there's a shaking up of haughtiness, God does not want to unify himself or live or unite there. Therefore, those first two trumos, that every man, every human had an equal hand in it, meaning an equal amount they had to give, as it says in chapter 30, verse 16. That a wealthy person should not increase and a poor person should not decrease. There's no place for one person to glorify himself upon his friend by saying that my gift was greater than your gift. That's where Hashem related and placed his name upon. As we said, it mentioned, if they shall take from me, to me, for my sake. And we already explained this in the beginning of the Parasha of Maka in the case. Every place where my name is mentioned, this you'll find in chapter 20, verse 21. That every letter that makes up Hashem's name, great and awesome name, relates to the concept of humility. Ayin Sham Bishniya Amar Trumasi. What he says over there, if I'm not mistaken, in Parashat Miketz, if you take the alphabet, so you have the letters, and we know that each letter has a numerical value, but there's many different ways to come to what the numerical value of every letter is. Okay? Meaning there's different systems. The straight alphabetary system, Aleph is 1, Bet is 2, on and on. But there's also a way to spell out the word. Like Aleph is Aleph Lamed Pei, or Bet is Bet Yud Tet, Bet Yud or you have Bet Yud Taf, on and on and on. Yud Vav Dalet, or Yud, right? Yud Vav Dalet. So you can spell out a whole word with each letter. So for example, Aleph would be 111. Aleph, Lamed, Pei, 111. So you have all the letters are not just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but they're actually different values based on what they call the Malay. You spell out the whole word. So the Yud and the Hey and the Vav, those letters are the lowest in value of the entire alphabet. And, every word has a root. But even if you take Yud, Hey, Vav, Yud, Hey, and a Vav and a Hey, which spells God's awesome name, you still come out with one of the lowest. In fact, it is the lowest value for any word in the entire lexicon of Hebrew. So God, we say that where you find His greatness is where you find His humility. In His greatness of being the Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, the all-powerful one and all-merciful one, you find the lowest denominator, the lowest value in terms of the numbering system. V'chein hadavar hanase min shtei trumos elu doime el truma atzmo. Some of the things made from these two trumos, they are similar to the truma itself. Ki shem shekulan hayu shavim bo, since just like all of them were equal, meaning equal in the giving, they were in half a shekel. Loya bashum hitnasut leechad al chavera. There's no possibility for one person to make himself above, through his own haughtiness, above his friend. If he was rich, he couldn't give more. Kach naaseh mitruma achas ha'adanim. So this is what they made from this truma. One of these trumas, one of these first two trumas, was for the adanim. The adanim are the sockets that are placed under the boards for the Mishkan. Ki kol adanim hayu shavim echad kamo chavera. So each one, they were exactly the same. You had 100 of these sockets, and every single one was square with a hole so that the planks could be placed in them. They would stand up. It served to hold up the planks. So each one of these adanim were equal, just like the other. Hayu taktonim l'kol habinyan as kupat hanidreshes. And they were on the lowest, they were on the bottom, right? They were the solid balancing act. The planks stood up because they were placed into these sockets. The whole building stood. Basically, these were it was on the ground, and you could basically, we're using the word like trampling upon them, that they were as the base, the bottom of the tabernacle. This was the foundation, and they served as the foundation to the entire building. Ki kamohem hayu osehem, just like they are, that's what they did. Ki kamo ha'oisim hanadavahi yushavim minatina. See, just like they did in this free will offering, they were all equal in their giving. There was not even one of them who was able to raise his head above and say how great he was more than his friends. So too they made these sockets from that gift, which reflects on the concept of humility. And this anava is the foundation, the fundamental part of this building. I mean, the building is based on this, that every Jew, Kol Beis Yisrael is Nachon, is proper. V'nikru b'shem Adonim, and they're called by the name. These sockets are called Adonim. Kishiyesh b'mashma'uto lashon adnus usrara. There is inferred in the language of the socket Adonim, the language of adnus and srara, which is reflecting on mastery and authority. Yan kikol mi she'oises atzmo ka'as kupa hanidreshes milamata nasa adon milamala. So anyone who makes himself like a floor mat from below, God will make him the master above. Kikol hamash pilatzmoi, anyone who lowers himself, Hakadosh Baruch Hu magbihu, Hashem is the one who raises him up. The oiso yisod v'noise l'kol binyan, and they make it as the foundation, and it carries, lifts up the entire building. Ka'adanim elu shayu yisoid just as these sockets act as the foundation, and they carry the whole structure. So too, the actual language of Nasi, which here we're talking about carrying, also we understand it to mean as the princess, because he lifts or he carries others. Because everyone can lean on them, meaning you're carrying somebody, people can rely on you, and you're a responsible person, and you care about others. From the second gift, or the second time Trumah is used, they would bring the communal offerings. They would buy the communal offerings with this money, and so it's from those animals which were brought on behalf of the Jewish people. We also know that every single day 2 Tamid offerings, 2 continual daily offerings were brought. One sheep was brought in the morning, and the second one was brought in the afternoon. You can find that in chapter 29, verse 39. And it's also written in Tehillim in chapter 51, verse 19. Ziv Ke'elokim Ruach Nishbara, that the offerings of God come through a broken spirit. Meaning to say, the purpose of these offerings are to bring a person to a broken spirit. Therefore, these also relate to Hashem. Shenemar, as it says, right? You shall take my truma. Since that gift, accordingly, that gift was made from it, anybody and from all who reflected this idea of humility. That's why God says, this is my truma. It serves as His gift. But when it came to the third gift, not everyone was equal. They're actually giving whatever they wanted, any one of the ingredients or materials to start with. That they can exchange. It was basically some can give less, some can give more. The wealthy person who gave more, there's a space, there's a place for him to become haughty, to raise up his head upon the ani by saying, that there is to me a greater portion in the house of God, even greater than the poor person. Kli Yakar. That's why through these materials, all of the vessels of the temple were made from. Kamo Aaron, V'Menoyu, Hashochan, V'Hamizbeach, V'Yesher Kelim. Just like the ark, the candelabra, the table, the altar, and all the rest of the kelim. There leaves no doubt. Shohaya Yitaro Niksatam al Kitsatam. Kizer Aronu Keneged Keser Torah. So there really is no doubt that there is an advantage to Liksatam al Kitsatam. Some upon others. Why? Why is there advantage from one on another? Kizer Aaron, when it came to the crown around the ark, which was Keneged Keser Torah, which was parallel to the crown of Torah, the Zer Mizbeach, the crown around the altar, Keneged Keser Kahuna, as if it was parallel to the crown of priesthood. Zer Shulchan, the crown around the table, Keneged Kesher Malchus, that would be parallel to the crown over kingship. Apapish Kafi Kedushas Hakelim Hayalola Kashbarhu Yaches Nedavazue Lavis Barach. So even though, according to the holiness of these vessels, there should have been for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to relate this giving upon himself, so to speak. Nevertheless, Makom Me'achar Shemitzad Geviyat Anadava Hayashem Sham Sad Ga'ava V'nasut Lamar Be'alamayit. So after the fact, there is an aspect of haughtiness of the giver. So there is there an aspect of haughtiness because he gave more than, to increase more than the person who didn't give a lot. That's why God did not relate his name to that third Trumah, because it allows too much, whether it's jealousy or envy of sorts, that people can become haughty one over another. So he did not attach his name to that third given. And in this regard, I saw an answer to a particular question. After the fact that there's a consideration of the gifts according to their levels. As we saw, it starts off with gold, then silver, and then copper, and it goes on and on and on to a more inferior product, ingredient, or materials. If that's the case, why was it considered the Avnei Shoham, the Avnei Miluim Libasot? Why were the precious stones, which are certainly more chashev, or more important, they were only at the end? There's no doubt that these expensive stones or gems were more expensive than gold, at least in weight. Even though you are able to answer by saying so since there was a reason, and we'll see in Rashi shortly, there was a reason, since the Nisim, the princes, they brought those precious stones last. So that's why they're last. Just like Rashi mentions Parshas V'Yakal. So I'll just take a short break and read that Rashi. This is in Lamed Hey 35:27. So it says the princes brought these stones. It says Rabbi Nosson said, Ma ra'u nesim hidnatev b'chanukas hamizbeach b'tchila. What is it that the princes saw that made them contribute first in the inauguration of the Mizbeach? So when it came to the inauguration of the altar, so then they brought, and they were responsible. But when it came to the construction of the Mishkan, we see here they brought last. But the princess actually said the following: let everyone else, whatever contribute first. And whatever they are lacking, we'll complete it, we'll fix it up. But guess what? Everyone brought, there was nothing left for them to bring. Right, the work was sufficient, it was enough. Our Nisim, so I guess the Nisim at this point said, whoa, what is there left for us to do? Well, they brought these very expensive stones that had not yet been given. That's why they contributed first at the inauguration of the Mizbeach. But what do we see? Since they lagged at the outset, meaning because they lagged, they were lazy at the beginning of the construction of the Mishkan, which is what we're dealing with here. So anyway, he mentions Nechsara Ois Mishmam. There was a letter deleted from their name, Hanesiim instead of Hanesiim. The Hanesiim is written the Hanesiim. Meaning like this. The singular form of Nasi, Nun, Sin, Yud Aleph, Prince, and the plural constructed is Sieh. Princes with two Yuds. So are always spelled with a Yud between the Sin and the Aleph, wherever they appear in Scripture. The regular plural form of the word, however, appears in a variety of spellings. In some verses, the word is spelled Nisi'im, with both the Yud of the singular and the Yud of the plural. In other verses, it's spelled Nisi'im just with one Yud in and one Yud out. But here, in our verse, it uses neither. There's no Yud at all. Okay, so we got the picture. Therefore, it mentions their gift last. Nevertheless, even according to the way we've discussing it so far, we're certainly able to say, God wanted to show them something. Whether it didn't matter whether you gave a lot or a little or a lot, everyone is equal in the eyes of God. That's why the most important or valuable gift of this precious stones was given at the end. So there won't be this glorification of the wealthy over the poor by saying, Nidvati Gedoyla, the Katuv Mana Barosh. I gave the most expensive, and that's why it's mentioned first. No. First of all, the most expensive thing was given at the end, and mentioned at the end. Hiskir Nidvatan Bachrona, so it mentions their gift at the end. Because of the haughtiness in their hearts, it came about that they ended up bringing only at the end. Lomar. Yitnadvu Hatzibor. As we said, they said, let the public bring. And from whatever they're lacking, whatever's missing, we'll make it up. This is certainly a haughtiness. Lomar, meaning to say, Yesh God will give us to fill whatever they're lacking. Therefore, the mentioning of their gift comes only at the end. Anyone who tries to build himself up, God brings him down, as it says in Gemara Erubin on Yud Gimel Amud Bet. And not only that, Lo Od Ela HaNesiim, we mentioned already is Chaser Yud Kasiv. Right? We mentioned that there's no Yud in the word princes. Ki rak od achat min Hashem hagadol chafut b'shem nasi. Out of all the four letters of God's holy and ineffable name, there's only one letter that anyway appears in the name. That would be the Yud. The Hainu Yud. The Al Yidei Hitnasu B'Divreihem. Because they lifted themselves up through their words, Lochav Hashem min Shemam Oizeh Mishmo Yisbarach. So God removed that letter from their name. This teaches us we must guard ourselves against being haughty and to make sure that we remain humble. As it's mentioned in the verse, and we'll see in a second, in chapter 20, verse 21, any place that I mention my name, that my name is mentioned, God will appear there. This is the fundamental principle of the Torah, V'tzurat hayud norgam kein al ha'anava v'aktanut. That the letter yud itself also reflects on the smallness and the humility in itself, because it is the smallest letter. It's barely recognizable. It can look like just a dot on the page. Okay, thank you very much. I wish you all good Shabbos.